Hey guys, welcome back. We're bringing you a special edition right now. Our last episode, we had a very informative panel. Chief Purdue from the Safer Buildings Coalition and Nathan Hinkle from the Sacramento Regional Radio Communications Shop, SRRCS for short. And we had a great session where we premiered Tap Talks episode 2 and had a live Q&A. And even though we did that, there were still a lot of questions that went unanswered. So we wanted to take a moment in between official episodes and answer some of those questions for you and have some more conversations. Keep the conversation going. Try to bring you some solutions. So some of these have to do specifically with what we were talking about last time, and some of them are actually kind of out of left field, but we're going to try to answer them all for you. So we want to keep bringing the information as much as possible. So pretty excited. I'm off of 75 hard now. I get to participate in the drinking this time. I've already cracked my sipping spree. It is delicious.
And I'm just having water.
So thank you to the DAS doctor. The DAS doctor knows how to party. But so we thank you to Jonathan from Tilted Mash Brewing in Elk Grove, California, once again for the beer. And we're looking forward to our next location. If at any point you guys have anywhere that you'd like to see us visit, don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. We're looking to take this circus on the road, little traveling road show. So let us know another brewery you'd like us to participate at, and let us know if it's nearby you. Maybe you can come sit in with us and have some conversations. So without further ado, first let me. Delicious.
So glad to have you back, my friend.
I missed it so much. But do I look a little harder? Because it was 75 hard. Okay,
Dude,
so
I'm not gonna lie. You look good, my man. You did a good job, and I'm proud of you. That's for sure. I think we all are. That's an amazing job that you did. I'm not gonna lie. It's something that I'll think about doing.
Think about. No, I didn't do that to get compliments. I was doing it mostly to make fun of myself because obviously
I know.
Harder. But,
I know.
but thank you for that for sure. It was no joke actually, to be honest with you. Especially going through the holidays, through New Year's, through Tap Talks, through our Pulse offsite, right, where the rest of the team's drinking. I normally love that, a little FOMO when I'm not drinking, but it was good. I'm happy that I did it. It really pays some dividends when it comes to mental toughness and just saying you're going to do something and sticking to it. You know what I mean? So I just knew after a while with the team, especially, I couldn't let the team down saying, kept falling off and having everybody go, wait, hang on a second. You didn't drink at the offside, but then you drink another day, right? So, but hey, let's get into the Q&A real quick. I've got the DAS doctor, Greg Glenn, here to answer some questions. I got Jesse Friedman to bring the voice of the customer, bring it back in when maybe it's getting too technical or there's too many acronyms. I'm pretty dumb myself, so I'll be asking some silly questions too, but hopefully it helps to enlighten everybody. So the first one we had came in from Aaron Alarcon, hopefully I'm saying that right, from Clark Construction. He wanted to know what type of tools can be used to measure signal strength for both systems. I'm assuming he's meaning public safety and commercial cellular. Greg, you want to jump in on that? What tools can be used for both?
Well, it's really difficult to pinpoint a single solution to do both. Not that there aren't manufacturers that build with different set of software that can look at both types of systems, but the criteria that we use to determine whether a signal is good quality or not is different between a LTE signal, for instance, and a narrowband SMR signal. So
what's SMR?
Narrowband SMR.
Yeah. Specialized mobile radio, or LMR, land mobile radio system. We're looking at very small, narrow channels, 12.5 kilohertz to 25 kilohertz in the narrowband, what I would call LMR world, versus LTE, which are very broad channels, 10 megahertz to 20 megahertz wide. And the metrics that we use to determine whether or not a signal is of quality is very different amongst those two. So you might have specialized equipment that has software that can do both, but what a carrier looks for out of an LTE signal and what a licensee looks for an LMR signal are two completely different things. So it really takes a kind of a host of different equipment.
That's a good answer. I have one question for that. specific carriers, are they looking for the same testing, or they have different parameters, or how does that match
Okay,
together?
in general, LTE across the board, most carriers are looking at the same metrics. Now, some may have a different level that they want to see. For instance, uh, one might want to have a minus 98 RSRP versus one having, say, a minus 95 RSRP minimum, and then and that's an LTE term, and that's a
RSRP, what does that mean?
uh, resource block power, yeah, it's resource block power. Okay, and basically it's resource block pilot power, I believe, is what that specifically stands for. But that's telling you how strong the signal is. Kind of like the same term we would use RSSI in the public safety side in a 12.5 kilohertz channel. We use this pilot power reference as to determine the signal strength of the signal. And then you have RSRQ, which is the quality. So you got RSRP, which is the power level. RSRQ is the quality. When we look at public safety, we have RSSI is the strength, and SINAR, or signal to noise ratio, or bit error rate, depending on the modulation technology, is going to determine the quality. So they're different metrics, but they both are looking at kind of the same thing, but it's very different metrics and very different pieces of equipment to look at it.
Well, I think that what it gets back to is that you have to know what your objectives are, because most of the time, if you're going to be testing signal strength for public safety, what you really want to know is, hey, the fire code says I have to have a certain level and amount of coverage inside of a building. So do I meet that? That's a much more simple test. That's something that can be done when you talk about grid testing and everything else. I mean, it's still accepted a lot of places to just draw out the grid and mark down your readings and everything else, right? So now there's definitely some equipment out there that'll do it much more sophisticated these days. But when it comes to just, audio quality, making sure a two-way radio can work inside of a building, you need a lot less data than you do when it comes to commercial cellular, and making sure that carriers are going to be happy with the coverage inside that building, or the users of cell phones are going to be happy with the coverage inside that building. So there's a lot more metrics that come into that. Matter of fact, it's definitely not just about signal strength.
Right.
when you're looking at that.
Well, it's not even really about
carriers,
signal strength, even when you're looking at public safety. But both of them have a quality metric and a signal metric. And the way that the carriers look at things, they like to see a lot more data, because they're using different cell sites with different cell site IDs. So they want to look at the interference from what would be neighbor cell sites versus the serving cell, where you typically don't have all of those things coming into play in public safety. Although in simulcast systems you do have TDI and a few other issues, but for the most part, you're 100% right, Kenny, that the amount of data, the number of metrics that are collected to do a carrier walk typically are much greater than what we would do to do an LMR type analysis.
And what you're often talking about isn't just hardware, it's also software.
Yes.
So do you have the right software loaded onto whatever hardware to decode the carrier signals, decode the LTE signals, et cetera, to extract more of that
Right.
data. So,
So is
you
all this stuff
definitely,
pretty pricey? I mean, like if you got to have it all, I mean, is it a pretty pricey? Got to get different equipment, different
once
software.
again, it gets back to what's your objective, right? So just to do
Okay.
public safety, you're definitely looking at less. Just to just gauge, is there carrier coverage here? You could go with a less expensive. Once you start getting into anything where you really want to start talking to the carriers themselves about how their system's performing somewhere, they're going to want to be able to look at a lot harder data, a lot deeper data, and you're going to be paying for a lot more licenses. It just kind of keeps adding on. Oh, you want to test that frequency? All right, you got to pay for this. Oh, you want to test that technology? All right, you got to pay for this, right? So it can start to add up. So, one thing I will say, and I'm not necessarily here to push anybody's stuff, but PCTel is a company that does have a hardware platform that can do both. Once again, you're going to have to decide exactly how much you want to pay. They've got different software options that you're going to pay more the more you want to be able to do. But it all gets back to what's your objective. and what are you actually trying to get tested. And you've got to be very, very careful there. And that's why just saying, hey, testing signal strength, I mean, that's not all that happens when it comes to doing a lot of these tests, right? So you got to know what your end goal is for sure.
Right on.
Greg, do you know any right off the top of your head that are some other platforms? I know there's software like Solutalia, and some others.
Yeah, there's
that
software
you
that
load
can be
onto
put on
different
phones.
devices.
Was it whoever you got Keysight, which used to be Agilent? I think they sold their drive test stuff off to a company called Avalent. I mean, there's still a few companies that build what I would call carrier drive test software. For on the public safety side, you've got PCTEL, you've got Enritsu makes the LMR master. You've got Bird Technologies now builds a product. So there are several different products out there that can be used to do these assessments for bit error rate and signal strength and signal quality.
Well, and let me save somebody some headaches before they run out and get any of them. Also, keep in mind if you need to do post processing, because you can get all that data all you want, but what kind of report are you going to turn it into? And is the customer going to be happy with what they find? And so that comes down to post processing. Oftentimes, that's, once again, you're talking about different licenses or different software, right? Do you want to be able to see a 3D rendering of the building and be able to watch yourself walk around in that building after the fact, so you can see that where you got those coverage readings? There's a lot of different things that are kind of being requested out there. There's a lot of cool tools out there, but at the same time, you're going to pay for all of them. So you better make sure whatever your customer's going to want, whatever you're going to need to deliver, that's the right software you get. Don't get duped.
Or you can call us.
Jesse will come do it for you. All right, let me reach over here and scroll around, find some more questions.
Are you going to pull the hat out there, Kenny? Is it kind of like what's the name of that show? Whose line is it anyway? We're going to do scenes from a hat.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I've got one. So, and I think, Greg, I think you'll like this one. How do on-site walkies and instant talk affect radio communications?
Okay, well, on-site walkie is a term that really is kind of an interesting term. I don't know what the heck that really means. But when we talk, we do have to be concerned about the total RF environment. And this goes back to even what we talked about earlier about a wireless master plan. You get into a hospital, for instance, and you've got no-go monitors for babies, and you've got all these other little communication things like your VHF stuff that you might be using for your MedNet, and your UHF stuff that may be using MedNet or dispatching ambulances, and you got fire, and you've got all these other things. They do all interact. So you do have to understand the dynamic of the building that you're working within. So yes, they can affect it, and no, they may not affect it, but that's where you have to understand, I have a VHF system that I use internally in the hospital, as well as I've got VHF amplifiers on the roof for, say, bringing in the local fire department. They all have to be accounted for, and they all have to be engineered around. So you can have interaction, definitely, from a particular one service to another. That might be in the same band or close.
Jesse, did that answer your question?
I was just thinking about walkie-talkies when I was like 12 running around, and if that's gonna, bother what's going on in there. But no, I think I kind of got a grasp of what you're talking about. It seems like it's a pretty complicated question.
Well, it's not it is when you talk about walkie-talkies when you were a kid, right? That was a little CB radio. Today, I mean, we have family radio service. We've got commercial stuff. They all share the same band, so we have to understand how they interact. So, if you had CBs in there in a building, it's probably not going to affect your in-building system. But if you have 450 meg walkie-talkies and you have 450 meg fire department, yeah, you've got to be concerned about it.
Gotcha.
So you think that question was actually in reference to, say, two different systems running on the same general spectrum?
Yes. I would imagine that's what it was saying. I mean, when you, yes, that's the only way I could interpret it.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, I think, and I'm just riffing here, just
That's all.
riffing. But the question to answer it, in my opinion, would be that a well-installed in-building system should not be affected by walkie-talkies inside of there, right? If it's properly balanced, if it's properly installed, so you're not going to get any sort of near-far effect, then they shouldn't have any real bearing on the system.
Well, that would all depend on what frequencies the
Kick me in the teeth
walkie-talkies
if
are
you want.
operating on versus the
Okay.
versus the frequencies that were. Well, for instance, today, right? You got Sacramento Regional, and then the actual one of the testing companies had their own 800 meg portables in the building. Will those portables affect the BDA? Yes, they can, depending on what frequencies they're operating on. So yes, but you have to know. You have to know what's going to be in the building, or at least have a good idea.
Absolutely. And we can bleep out any names and everything, right, to protect the
Well,
inside.
I don't. I hope I didn't say any names.
Okay, let's get on to the next one. If you were the one that asked that question, that didn't answer what you needed, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Mhm.
You've got the email. You can reach out to any of us at powerofpulse.com or taptalks@powerofpulse.com. Ask a question anytime. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll also put some links in the show notes and everything else. So actually, I have no idea what we're doing. So we'll give you a way to access us
I got a
one
full
way or
beer.
another. I'm not responsible for production. So, how about this one from Tom Cooper? If too many BDAs keep causing too many problems, why do people keep deploying them instead of using solutions that can mitigate this problem, like digital fiber DAS?
Well, um, okay. I'm gonna take a break here, and I'm gonna say break, and I'm gonna say if you want to edit this out, you can. So I'm just gonna stop, and now I'm gonna
Just
start
keep on going.
the fire. This is a direct result of badly written fire code. End. Now you can
All
leave
right.
that in or leave that out. I don't
Yeah,
care.
probably cut
But
that.
we have people enforcing certain rules that do not understand the ramifications of the rules that they are enforcing, and rather than taking it to the professionals that understand what is going on, we have documentation that's written that does not really grasp the magnitude of what installing a BDA really means. And so as a result, BDAs get used many times in applications where they should not be used, where exactly what Tom is saying, digital DAS, there are other solutions that should be used to create coverage than signal boosters. But because the fire code kind of calls out signal boosters, that seems to be the go-to fix rather than.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
so basically we're talking about the same thing we were, talking about in our program, right? The lack of communication between the two groups, the misreading or miswritten fire code, however we want to call that. I can see it both ways as it's miswritten, not leading to a certain scenario, but also misread to where these people, might not have that knowledge that the people that wrote it have, so they don't understand and they think that's the solution. But there's other solutions out there, and it goes kind of back to what we were talking about, Kenny, like looking at the holistic view, right? I mean, there is a lot of different solutions to the problems out there, both cellular and ERRCS fire code. I mean, public safety. There's a lot of solutions out there, and you really got to look at the problem. You gotta conversate with the license holder. You gotta have the AHJ get involved and know beforehand, and really talk to somebody, whether it's us or somebody else that knows how to navigate those waters and make sure that we're doing the right thing. But that seems to be the issue. That's hopefully what we've been touching on and what we're banging on still. But I think that question kind of is what it's all wrapped up around, right?
well, I mean, I know a minute ago you said you can cut this out if you want, Greg, but I don't think it's a bad statement, right? So, um, mistakes happen, or sometimes when you do something with the best interest at heart, you don't necessarily take into account the second and third order effects of what you're doing there. now we're seeing the ramifications of writing the code in a certain way. So now there's action being taken. I mean, it does take time, but there is movement in the industry and in the fire community and everything else to try to fix what's going on out there. And Greg,
Yep.
you know, to toot your horn a little bit,
You're
you
one
were the
of them.
one that first started kind of sounding the alarm bells of, hey guys, what we're doing in this industry when we're trying to sell all these public safety BDA systems, when we're trying to just sell as many as possible, and hey, fire code says you need it, it can't work. And that's just purely a physics matter. That's a mathematical fact that you can't continue to do this. And so you started ringing the alarm bell a couple of years ago. And it's taken a while, but there's definitely some movement in the industry, and people are starting to realize that this is it's a cool solution. It's a cool tool, but it's only one tool in the toolbox, and it cannot be looked at like it's a silver bullet and it's going to solve all your problems. And so, you know, listen, let's give some shout outs to some people that we're involved with, but the Safer Buildings Coalition is putting together a no noise task force that they're trying to remedy some of these issues. Greg, I know that you are very active with the fire code committees, a number of them, to try to get the code written correctly for the next revision. It's like Chief talked about on the last Tap Talks, which is, you know, hey, listen, fire sprinklers, for instance, we've had over a century to get that right. This is a pretty new technology. When you look at it, it's only been in the fire code for, you know, 11, 12 years or whatever it is. We still need to get it right. And so, you know, the interesting thing here is there's two very different, very distinct government entities that play a part in this, and that's the FCC and then the fire code officials, right? So there's two different stakeholders that have a claim in this argument, and getting those tied together and on the same page is taking a little longer than I think a lot of people would like, right? But you know, the FCC's kind of been the silent one in the room, not really saying much, but it's their systems that are getting messed up based on what's going on with the fire code. So Greg, you've done a lot of great work in terms of kind of being the bullhorn for the FCC and coming out and saying, guys, this isn't okay. And now, you know, the FCC is they've encountered enough problems that they're drawing the line in the sand, and they're coming out and saying, this isn't going to work anymore. We got to fix it. So.
Absolutely. No, I think it's huge what you're doing out there. And, you know, the licensees, we're starting to finally see some communication. And that definitely has a lot to do with the work that you put in for sure. So.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. Sometimes I don't sleep at night. I wake up at 2 a.m. because it drives me nuts what's going on. But I've been doing this for a long, long time. And actually, just to clarify, in 2007 is when we started to see this problem. And we rewrote the rules in 2010 thinking that, I mean, we never saw it. We didn't see the problem to this magnitude. And we wrote rules in 2010 which should have sealed that, right, where we didn't have the problems. And the amplifiers and the hardware we see today is worse by far than what it was in 2007 and the problems we were trying to fix in 2007. And I mean, that to me, that's the staggering part, is that in 2007, we knew we had problems. We knew we were seeing issues. We set down some basic best practices guidelines. The equipment was all pretty good, to today, where we've actually put a little more teeth into the FCC rule, and yet nobody follows it. It's kind of like, if everybody would follow the FCC rule, 90.219, I would say if they followed both administrative and technical, probably 98 to 99% of all these issues would be vamoose gone. And that's
the problem. There is that there's a whole lot of people playing in the dark arts of RF, right? The dark arts of radio frequency, that really have no clue what they're doing. And so they have no idea that there's the FCC that dictates this. They don't know what the rules are. They just know that the fire code says that they can get paid to slap this system in. So by God, they're gonna slap this system in, right? So, you know, I don't want to go into attack mode here
right now, and you know that's what we're trying to tell everyone, right? It is the Wild West out there right now, and thanks people like Greg and SBC and these other organizations, including ourselves. I mean, we're trying to push that message out across the country, not just just for anybody's benefit, but to make sure that our public is safe. Make sure that our public servants are safe, that are out there, and the first responders are going to be safe, and that's the big picture, right? That's what we're trying to do. And I think we're chipping away at it. It sounds like, I mean, I feel like even in the last 3 months of being here and talking about that stuff, that we've seen some super positive steps, like you were saying, Kenny, with what SBC is doing, with the no noise, those types of things. And some of these manufacturers that are kind of getting called out. We're putting together our own program, right? We're opening. By the way, we're opening our office in 7 days in Northern California, but we're going to have, we're bench testing all the equipment out there. We're going to come up with a preferred vendor list, and we're not doing that, but to purely make sure that our company is going to be putting in equipment that's going to work and is going to protect the people that we're trying to protect, right? And it's not just going to be something that we're going to throw in there, and it's going to have to meet. Well, it's going to have to meet the DAS doctor's freak. Good luck.
Well, no,
because you're putting a stamp on it, so come out hard.
it's actually going to have to meet the intent of the FCC rules. That's the bottom line. I mean, in fact, well, I had this discussion today with Nate Hinkle, right? We were out on site all day, and it's like he's shaking his head how some of this equipment is out there, and I said, yeah, and unfortunately, the licensee has to be responsible for it. So, I mean, he's drawing up a 21-page document. It's 21 pages. And we're going to try to shrink it down, obviously. But this is half the problem, right? I mean, if we could get our arms around the equipment that's going in, that would be a huge issue. But again, it's Greg, not always the right solution.
That document that he's working on, I believe that's something he's gonna make available to people.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's going to be published. It's going to be Sacramento County's rules.
This is going to be a great tool for people to use in order to maybe deploy this to other jurisdictions and say, hey, listen, this is a good way of going about it. This is how you make sure that anything that's going to go in on your system, right? Any BDAs that are going to go in, any signal boosters, whatever you want to call it, whatever terminology you want to use. This is going to make sure it happens right. It's going to get, number one, approved ahead of time. Number two, designed correctly. Number three, installed and commissioned correctly, right? Yep. So if anybody wants that, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we can send it over once it's ready.
Right. It's still in draft form right now, but it will be, they're hoping to have it out by 3/1, but I have a sneaking hunch it's probably going to take a little bit longer. But it is a culmination of multiple agencies too coming together. One of the things I'm still wrestling with, and in their document, Nate's document, they're going to go in for 60-foot antenna radius max, or 60-foot separation. I forget what how it's exactly put. I've got to read it again. But, and while I'm not necessarily an advocate for that, I look at some of these system designs that are coming out today, and that's the only way they can protect themselves from somebody trying to cover, using an antenna to cover 400-foot radius. I mean, it's nuts what's going on right now. That doesn't mean that we're going to put in a BDA in every building. That doesn't mean that we may not be standing up ASRs. We may end up putting in new sites, voting receivers, but it means that we're going to do what's right for the network to bring coverage to our first responders. It does absolutely no good to put in a signal booster in a building that renders a signal booster in a building next door to it useless. And that's where we're at today. Unfortunately, in many markets, that's exactly what's happening. They go put in a signal booster in a new building, and it renders the signal booster that was put in 3 years ago in the building 600 foot away from it, or creates a coverage hole in a parking lot. I mean, it's all goes back to we're not engineering the systems as a whole. We're just piecemealing it. And I think we just had the same conversation about a large campus. You can't piecemeal it. You have to have a master plan. Licensees do. Public safety agencies have to have a master plan. Just putting a signal booster in a building is not a master plan. Kenny, you're laughing.
Yep.
No, I'm laughing because I've got some of the apex savages starting to show up. You know how these tower
Got it.
hens are, right? These guys that build towers are a
Well,
different
hey, you
breed.
better
So
drink. I
I'm
haven't
trying.
seen you take a sip of
I'm,
beer in a
I'm,
long time either.
I'm
Why don't you
trying to
put a
keep it
beer in your
relatively
mouth?
quiet over here, but I got these animals in the background, right? So,
Well, what's our next question? Do we have another question, or we?
you know, I'd like to call a little bit of an audible for a second, Greg. And you started hitting on back in 2007. You first started seeing the BDAs were a problem. The signal boosters were causing a problem. They weren't even written into the fire code at that point,
Right.
right? So
Well,
those were just popping up. Those were solutions that were out there when there was a known problem that firefighters or paramedic, the first responders said, we can't use our two-way radios inside this building. I want a
right.
solution.
And now I believe in 2007 it might have been an NFPA 72 by that point. And what we saw happening in 2007, 2006, 2007 timeframe was that number one, the noise problem, right? We had these broadband signal boosters would create noise. We started to see the advent of the channelized BDA, and some of those channelized BDAs were really, really good. The one that eventually became Cobham, they had a channelized BDA that literally the noise power outside of the channels that they were actually programmed to operate at was staggeringly good, right? And but we saw a problem with too much gain, right? Using too much gain, and in fact, Jack Daniel and myself, even there was best practices established. Use a minimum amount of gain necessary, and use a minimum amount of power, which is really part of the FCC rules. It doesn't happen to be with 9219, but if you go read the FCC rules in general, that when we use radios, those are, well, the gain issue is BDA specific, but you always use the minimum amount of power to have reliable communications. It's always been kind of an FCC pretense. But we talked about this in 2007, and one of the things that happened was, we came up. I started a company or started working with a company that became Solid Technologies, and that was one of the first companies to build what I would call easily accessible or mass produced product that was a fiber distribution platform for public safety, so that you didn't end up putting in BDAs or what you'll hear me call them packing BDAs or whatever. But in general, we knew the math then. We knew the math back about in 2002 that you really probably shouldn't be running these things if they're less than a quarter mile away. You're kind of running on a knife's edge, right? You're sitting there, you're running on the knife's edge, and if you make one false move, man, it's going to cut you where it hurts, And
So
so we came up with technologies to deal with that, but that's not what the fire code. Unfortunately, that wasn't what happened when the fire code.
so this technology, bottom line, has been around for a long time.
87.
It was used to solve sporadic problems whenever they were there and they were known. The fire code then said, hey, there's these solutions out on the market and we have a problem. Let's make sure that we don't have this problem anymore. Failed to take into account that you can't just slap these in everywhere, right? So that's where the problem did start to morph, where the original problem, right, was lack of coverage inside of buildings for first responder, putting first responders' lives at risk because they couldn't communicate inside of buildings when they were responding to emergencies. A solution was there. It was written in the fire code. But now, in some instances, what's that old saying? The cure is worse than the disease, right? So now we are running into some problems where these things are being installed so badly that they're taking down the entire network or network for miles around. And tell me what's worse: having lacking coverage inside of one building that you might have to respond to, or not having any coverage for your first responders for a 3-mile radius when they're trying to communicate. Right? So much bigger problem. And I don't want to sound alarmist here because this isn't happening everywhere. But the point is that if the fire code isn't revised, which it's being worked on right now, and if people's eyes aren't open to this problem over time, it could become a much bigger deal, right? So it is a problem that's coming and needs to be addressed, and there's a lot of people doing good work on that. Greg, you're out there fighting that fight. The Safer Buildings Coalition's fighting that fight.
we're finding problems that have been places for 3 years that are related to BDAs that were put in 3 years ago. You know,
Well, we're
And
talking about a project, that right now that it's you got two county buildings, right, sitting right next to you. There, one hasn't been built, one has, and the FCC license holder didn't even know the next one was going in, which is a massive building and a massive network, and they're trying to design that as they have the macro right sitting next door, 200 yards away from it. Um,
well, and we've talked about that one in the past, but then we went to another campus nearby, and they had decided that their spec was all new buildings would have a BDA installed to make sure that there was no coverage issues, right?
every
And
building,
every building.
every
And
building.
so, luckily we caught that pretty early, but
Yeah.
that's an issue. And that's where,
But
so
even
I don't,
uncovering that issue also made us discover through the consultant that he's doing another building across the street, has nothing to do with that campus, nothing to do with that customer. It's a parking garage across the street that's for a totally different related project, and they're installing one there too. So it just keeps going on, and it's like chasing a rabbit, right? And that's why we need to educate and have these general contractors and these consultants and AHJs and licensees communicate better, but also just bring in experts, even if it's not us. I mean, just bring in experts and to really look at the situation. Not just experts that know or supposedly know, DAS or ERRCS or whatever, but we're talking about people that have relationships with the license holders, with the HCAs, have experience in public safety, have experienced with BDAs, and that actually really have been vetted out and know what they're doing. I'm lucky enough to join this company, and obviously we've got the talent here, and so somebody like me can go out there and say we got it, and even though I don't know what I'm talking about, but but yeah, that's the key to, in my mind, is really finding the people to do it, and we're really out there trying to promote this nationwide. We're not going to solve everybody's problems nationwide. I wish we could. I'd be rich, but we're not. And so it's really about pushing out that message that, if we can get the message out, then at least people will be doing this properly. And then we can make sure we're trying to vet the manufacturers to try to help with that side of it. We're trying to talk to, trying to build a community with the help of organizations like SBC for licensees, for AHJs to come together and communicate. And those are the things we're trying to do on a holistic view of the entire nation and the problems that I think we're experiencing with communication today, right? And I think the more we can push this message out to people, even within their own social networks, if you're an AHJ, push this out to your other AHJ. If you're a licensee holder, push this out to your people that you know. But we're just trying to build a community here to where we can try to solve problems, not just put band-aids on it, like Kenny, you love to say, right? You just not like, we can't just keep putting band-aids, man. We gotta come together and really try to get these two sides to communicate, get integrators to not just do whatever the specification says and put a solution, and the OEM stop selling freaking product, man. You gotta be smarter than that too. It's gonna make your company look better if you're out there looking at solutions, not just trying to sell a piece of equipment every freaking time you go to a sales call. Maybe your piece of equipment works, but maybe the bigger picture is let's go to your company and talk about how we can solve problems, right?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. Um, Real quick, I know it's tap talks, but I've actually switched over to some basil hammers.
Heyo!
Called a little audible, went to some bourbon now. So
I need my bartender called Jessica, my wife.
get her in here.
Yes.
Hey, Greg, the last question that we got, I think that we've got time for is when do you think the ROIP shit?
the ROIP shit. I know
I
what
tried to
ROIP
memorize. I
shit
had to
is.
pull it back up. When do you think ROIP will start to penetrate the ERRCS
Okay.
market?
First of all, let's define ROIP. Right. A lot of people don't know what
Agreed.
that means. ROIP is radio over
Jesse,
internet
raise your hand.
protocol. Okay. A lot of people have heard of VoIP, right? Voice over Internet Protocol. Well,
I know that
VoIP,
one.
it's VoIP for two-way radio, basically. Now, what I think is going to happen is that we are going to, in order for us to make the in-building enhancement thing move forward, we've got to, multiple things have to happen. Number one, licensees have to scale their networks and build the proper systems from the macro environment, right? So macro environment's going to have to be created and grown in a holistic fashion, in a scalable fashion. At that point, then a licensee can then look at, okay, where do I have coverage holes? And coverage holes you're gonna solve by multiple different ways. You may use signal booster. You may use voting receivers.
Real quick on the uplink and downlink. So you have the uplink, which is for them.
Uplink would be the radio, the portable radio or mobile radio that talks back to the site. So uplink is anything that talks back
downlink,
to the site, the big site. And then downlink is the downlink signal, right? So in Sacramento County, because of the way that now the radio system's been deployed, really their problem is with downlink signal getting into the building. But portable uplink is very good. So like, for instance, the one we were on today, they turned the uplink portion of the amplifier completely off. Boom. And then they were able to go through and test with their portables, and they can look at, the portables getting into the network and read the signal level, and, everything was cool. Now, when we talk about radio over IP, that's, in the cellular world, we call, talk about backhaul, right? We got a base station, we need to backhaul it, and we backhaul it how? We either put it on fiber, or we put it on a phone line, or we put it over IP, right? The thing about a signal booster is you're backhauling it on channel, on your own radio frequencies, back on the actual radio frequencies the radios are using. So you have outside radios as well as the amplifiers contending, if you will, for the same RF space, right? And each of these amplifiers generate their own little bit of noise. So at the end of the day, what you start to do is you start to erode the outside coverage. That's one thing you do. Or you have these interactions between BDAs where building one interacts with building two because nobody knows that building one and two.
Hey, Greg. Hey, when will ROIP start to penetrate the ERRCS market?
I'm trying to explain that. So ROIP is going to be, it's not going to be ROIP as much as it's going to be a digital backhaul method of some other way so that you're not doing it over the air. When that is already available in the P25 platform via the ISSI interfaces. There are several interfaces that are available to do that right now. Now, the radio manufacturers haven't really come up with a way to do that at a reasonable cost yet. But, I mean, it's already here. At what point is it going to become a popular solution? I don't know yet. We're going to have to see. But
so right now it's cost prohibitive. That's what's holding it back.
Yeah, I think right now it is pretty prohibitive to use it at a building level. That's correct. It would be, you would use it for more of a large campus level. So actually it's already there. It's already available, but it's not being used yet, and I think it has to do with cost.
Hey, Greg, thanks for the thanks. Jesus. Hey guys, I gotta put a bow on this thing. I got the Apex Savages showing up. It's our offsite this week, and we're doing some strategic planning. So the tower dogs are here. I gotta make sure we put a bow on this before it gets too rowdy. So. It's a little different when you talk about climbing towers versus fixing systems inside buildings, all right? So we got a different animal walking in the door.
Whatever. Hey, we can party too, man.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Hey, reach out to us if you need anything, all right? You got our socials. You got our website. You got our emails. We'll put some links into something here. Let's converse. Let us know if you want any more information out of us. We're here to bring information. Let us know what we should talk about next. We love you. Thank you.